Hey guys, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Fred. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Fred. But for now, enjoy the show. Hey, hello. Welcome to the Creative Magic Unchained. Let's get it on. Thank you so much. Do you aspire to a creative life? Are you tired of working 9 to 5? Are you asking yourself, what is the point of it all? Or do you want to take your creativity to the next level? This is your show. This is a creative podcast, Unchained. This podcast is about unleashing your creativity. We talk to experts. We step into the unknown. It is an inspirational podcast. It is a magical podcast. It is an intuitive podcast as we chat with enigmatic, charismatic artists and, from around the globe. And you know what? For me, artists, who are they? They're musicians. Obviously, they're singers. They're radio hosts. They're business people. They're photographers. Everything in between. I am Frédéric Bay, and I am your host. I'm a businessman. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I'm a friend. I'm a partner. I'm an animal lover. This podcast is free every time you download it on iTunes or Stitcher. Please go over there and subscribe. It is listener supported, so tell a friend, leave a review, a 5-star review. It really helps a brother out. And for more podcasts, free gifts, Q&A articles, subscribe at FrédéricBay.com. That's FrédéricBay.com. On Twitter, @ByFred. On Facebook, simply type in my name, Frédéric Bay, and check out my YouTube channel, The Creative Magic, for previous episodes. Hey, we're going to kick off this episode. It's the first ever episode. Obviously, you can go on my YouTube channel for previous episodes, but you're going to see all the future episodes on it. And we're going to kick off this amazing podcast with a very, very successful individual. Oh yeah, he owns a radio show. His name is Jim Beach. Jim Beach's first book, School for Startups, was published by McGraw-Hill in June 2011 and reached as high as number 9 on Amazon's business section. Jim started businesses, and he has taught entrepreneurship around the globe, and he recently won the Small Business Administration Media Advocate Award for his terrestrial radio show. Hey, you're going to hear in this interview, Jim is open, Jim is honest, and Jim is true. You have to be true. You have to get a little bit a kick in the butt sometimes, for all you creatives out there. I know how you think. I know how you feel. I know how you are. And it's a very, very, sometimes, uncertain, path out there, for anything you want to do. You know what I mean? You want to, if you want to go from a job to a creative endeavor, it's a fun journey. It really is a fun journey, and it is very doable. So I want to take off this stigma, this myth that the creative journey is full of the starving artist thing. BS to me. BS. And we're gonna talk about this today. He's gonna advise you. He's gonna push you. He's gonna push you to the next level, and I love this interview. So without further ado, we're going to get to the conversation right after this. Quick thanks to RadioGuestList.com, where you can find people to interview for free. Thank you guys. Thank you for your support. And for advertisement offers, you can reach me at info@FrédéricBay.com. That's info@FrédéricBay.com, and use the subject advertising. Hello. So we are here with the one and only Jim Beach. He's a serial entrepreneur, a speaker, an award-winning radio host, and best-selling author. How are you,
I'm
Jim?
great today. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. Hey, right before we dive into your current craft, give us an idea here of your background.
Well, I got fired from corporate America when I was 23 years old. They told me that I didn't have the right personality to work for them, and I was devastated. And so I started my first business when I was 24, 25 years old, grew it to 700 employees in the 7 years with no capital infusion and 89 locations across the United States. Sold that in 2001 when I was 31, 32 years old, and I became a professor with a small P at a local university, teaching entrepreneurship, and made a bet with my students the first semester that I could start a business that semester, get it cash flow positive, repay all my startup capital that semester, and they got to choose the country and the industry that I would start the business in. I won that bet, Frederick, 12 semesters in a row, and eventually that turned into a McGraw-Hill book, became a number 9 bestseller on the best-selling list, and that turned into a radio show. I do a lot of fundraising for other businesses, help people write business plans, raise money, make strategic entrepreneurial decisions, plan how they're going to start a business, and I have 4 kids and 2 dogs.
Wow. Okay. What a pedigree. What a pedigree. That's awesome. Hey, I love to talk with people like you guys because I know you have a lot to say. So tell me, let's go. So, cause right now you're a best-selling author, right? You're a radio host. So you're doing all this stuff, but let's go back to when you were 23 years old because see, this show is about creativity. It's about, unleashing our creativity. And when you're 23, oftentimes and you were working in corporate America, oftentimes 23 years old is a time when we're afraid of life.
Oh, you know very much so. Yes.
We're afraid of the future. We're afraid of what's going, and give me the role of creativity back at that time. I mean, and in a way, when you get fired, it's not fun to get fired.
No, it was horrible. It devastated me. I thought my life was over. Everything I ever wanted was gone. So it was one of the saddest moments of my life. But I have a very unusual role on or view on creativity. I think creativity is awesome and that it's one of the neatest things out there. But also it's hard to be creative when you're insecure. It's hard to be creative when you're not confident in yourself. And I think that a lot of times we have to grow into our creativity. I would not say that I was creative at all when I was in my 20s. It took me years of success before I trusted my creativity, before I learned to listen to that little voice on the inside that would actually be my creativity. And when I was 23, I was not creative at all. And the advice that I would give to people is there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you're not yet good at being creative and that it's something that you need to work on. I think creativity is a skill just like any other. If you want to learn to speak French, you take French lessons for years and years and years, and you practice every day, and you find friends that are French, and you practice your French. And it's the same thing with ballet or cooking or being a race car driver. You have to spend years getting good at it. And I think one of the problems with society and with entrepreneurs is that people say, are you creative? Yes or no. And it's a binary situation. Well, it's not a binary situation. You can be 1% creative with the goal of getting to 62% creative in the next 10 years, and then eventually by the time you're 90, being 90% good at creativity. I remember back in, I think, the 3rd or 4th grade, Frederick, one of my teachers told me to draw a monster. And so our assignment in class was to draw a monster, and I drew a monster, and my monster had 3 heads. And she said, Jim, this is horrible. This is not good. Everyone knows that monsters only have 2 heads. And I was like, what? I didn't know that. What do you mean I can't have a 3-headed monster? My monster has 12 heads, Haven't we ever heard of, is it Medusa, the lady that has snake hair, right? What's wrong with a monster that has three heads. And I learned right then that I was not creative. I was told that I was not good at art, that I did not know how to draw, and it took me years to recover from that.
Where do you think that comes from? That fear, you mentioned fear of creativity. I think that's interesting. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that it's something that we are taught. You know, that when we go to school at the very beginning in the American school system, they ask you to draw. And some kids draw 3D beautiful pictures, you know, the time they're 5 years old. And some kids have to be taught perspective and have to be taught how to draw. That certainly was my case. And therefore you are labeled as someone who's not creative based on your ability to draw a picture. And it's something that you're told, you know, by the age of 10, you know whether you're good at basketball or not. You know whether you're good at soccer or not. You know whether you're creative or not. And I was certainly taught that I was not a creative kid. And, you know, that it turned out not to be true. I think I'm very creative now, but at the time, I was told very clearly, oh, you're just not creative. You're not good at art. And they judge your creativity based on one very, very minute skill set. And it took me years to learn that I could, in fact, be creative. And it took me even more decades after that to learn how to be creative.
See, I think maybe this is one of the reasons why I do this show is because I think I am frustrated a little bit with exactly what you just mentioned, is that we're taught that we're not creative. We're taught this, you know. It's almost they stifle your creativity. Tell me something. You said it took you years to get your confidence back and say, you know what, I am a creative guy, you know, I do it my way. What did you do? For anybody out there who is listening, who feels the way you felt back in the day, what did you do to unleash that? Unleash the creativity?
Well, there are lots of creativity exercises that you can do. There's books that you can buy on how to become more creative, and I certainly recommend that wholeheartedly. You can spend time every day being creative. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to learn to be more creative, one of the first things you should do every morning is sit down with a piece of paper or in a journal and write 3 business ideas. And they may be really stupid at first, and it may take an hour at first, but eventually you will train your brain to look for ideas, and you will learn to become more creative. You need to pay attention to the things that are around you. One of the businesses that I did was exporting Christmas trees. And the way I started that business was I was in London for Christmas, and I was blown away, Frederick, by how ugly the Christmas trees in London were. There were no good Christmas trees. I mean, I have a picture that I took outside the Tower of London of the nicest Christmas tree that I found in all of the UK, and it looked like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. It was the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but it was the best one there. And I started thinking about it. Well, why is it so ugly? Well, it's United Kingdom. It's an island nation. For hundreds of years, they have been building buildings out of stone. Their architecture is stone-based. They have beautiful green fields, which means they've cut down a tremendous amount of their forest. Most of the forest in the United Kingdom are owned by the royal family and are conservation areas, which is a great idea. But in other words, we end up with a country that doesn't have many trees. And because of that, they don't have fields of trees that they go cut down and call Christmas trees. Well, this becomes an idea that you should start exporting Christmas trees to island nations that have already cut down all of their trees. Japan, Korea. Korea is, of course, a peninsula, but with North Korea at the top, it's basically an island. All of these are incredible markets for exporting Christmas trees. And so there's a creativity game that you can play. Why do people have this in this particular culture? Why is this so popular at this Christmas? Think about these things And eventually you can train your mind to become more creative. So I was telling you about the bet that I made with my class. The first semester said that I had to start a Pakistani furniture company, and I had 4 months to build a profitable Pakistani furniture company. Well, I had no idea about furniture. I knew nothing about Pakistan, and this was right after 9/11, so I knew that it was going to be hard to export from Pakistan. And I started thinking, and I did some research. What does Pakistan have? Well, they have lots of rugs and lots of textiles. And, well, rugs, okay, what can we do with a rug? And where have I ever seen interesting uses of rugs? And then I remembered back 5 years, 6 years before that, I'd been to a flea market in Santa Barbara, California. And I saw a piece of luggage there that it looked like they had taken an old Oriental rug and cut the rug up and made it into a piece of luggage with a leather bottom. If you look around, you'll notice that type of luggage quite a bit now. Pier 1 actually has a knockoff of that available last Christmas season. And I was like, well, what if I just simply took that a step further, right? And so the creativity is, what can I do to go one step further? Well, instead of making a piece of luggage, why don't we make a armchair out of an old carpet? What if we took a 100-year-old Persian rug from Pakistan that we could buy in a flea market, cut it up, and use that as the fabric on a normal Queen Anne, George Washington type armchair? And that's what we did, and that business was very, very successful. We sold them to the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, and to the Coca-Cola CEO, bought several for his house. It was a very popular and successful business based on one leap of creativity. Instead of taking luggage, why not make that into furniture? And boom, it worked. So I think that creativity can be learned by being more observant, right? I spent time focusing on my creativity. Every day I try to practice my creativity just like I practice my French.
Interesting. Once again, we are listening to Jim Beach. You are on the Creative Magic Unchained show and Jim Beach is a serial entrepreneur, speaker, and award-winning radio host and best-selling author. This is fascinating. Tell me, you work with entrepreneurs and you are an entrepreneur. Sometimes I think people, they relate creativity to art. Like, you're a painter, you're a writer, but we often seldom think of creativity is for everybody is creative. Even business people. To be an entrepreneur, in my opinion, is automatically to be a creative person, an artist. Don't you think?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I agree with so much of what you said, but I think that entrepreneurs, to be a successful entrepreneur, you don't have to be creative. It's awesome if you are, and it certainly makes it easier. But one of the things that I like to say is, if you haven't learned your creativity yet, do not let that postpone your entrepreneurial career. So I don't think that you get extra points as an entrepreneur for being creative. You don't get extra money necessarily. If you have a satisfied customer, that customer doesn't care where you got the idea for the business from. And so if you're sitting on the sofa at home right now wanting to be an entrepreneur, but you have not yet been struck with this creativity lightning bolt from God, because shaboom, go start this business, don't wait on the sofa for God to strike you with a creativity lightning bolt. Just go start a business. And that's what I did. The first business I started was a 100% copy of an existing business that I knew about. As a matter of fact, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is produced by Babson University and the London School of Economics, says that 93% of businesses around the world are copies of someone else's business. And so most entrepreneurs are not creative. They saw an idea and said, hey, I'm going to go and do that too. And that's what happened to me. I didn't get good at creativity until my self-esteem, until my awareness of what I was doing had increased. And 10 years later, I thought I was starting to become good at creativity. So I think that it's awesome when you have a creative idea. But even Facebook was a copy of something else that existed before that, right? It's hard to go and find a business that's truly, truly creative. Most businesses are copies of someone else's idea. But what's important, Frederick, is to take the idea and make it better through incremental creativity. So the business that I copied was a children's education business. It had 2 locations in the Northeast. One was at the Clark Crest Resort in Connecticut. Well, this was in the 1970s when I went there, and it was an absolute dump in the 70s. And in the 90s, by the time I started my business, it was probably falling down and should have been condemned. And so I said, I can take that same business, but instead of doing it at the Clark Crest Resort in Connecticut, what if I did it at one of the top universities in the world? What if I did it at MIT and Stanford? And the first year that I started my business, I was actually located at MIT and Stanford. And then we expanded into Georgetown, UCLA, McGill, and Montreal, University, all of the major universities. We had 89 locations. Each one was the best university in its town. So the creativity that I did was I took someone else's idea and I implemented it. I executed it better. I said, let's go find the best university to host our education program as opposed to doing it at just some place. And that's the only level of creativity that I used. But that set my business apart from a business that had been there for 20 years. I copied their business, but I did it so much better than they did that I grew to 89 locations with 700 employees in 7 years. And so the trick, I think, at the beginning, painters have to paint thousands of paintings before they become Picasso, right? Picasso wasn't Picasso with the first painting that he did. It took him years to get good at it. So as entrepreneurs, I think we need to realize the same thing, that you need to work on your execution, your fiscal management, your HR skills, your ability to manage other people, and you need to work on your creativity. So it's still something that I work on, and I think I'm 10 times more creative than I was when I was 23. But don't be afraid to go and copy someone else's idea to start with. And I don't want you to copy their trademarks or their patents or anything that's going to get you in trouble. But a business model you can go and copy. Read about something in Inc. magazine. Read about something on the internet and find a way to do it in your market better than the people that you saw doing it before. And that's one of the reasons I love international travel. I love to go and see an idea, see what someone's doing somewhere else, bring it back to my market and try to do it here, but just execute it better. And then I was like, wow, I'm making money. I've got 700 employees. I must be good at this. And you know what? That self-confidence allows you to be more creative, to trust your creativity, to trust your instincts. And then all of a sudden you do become creative and you have an amazing idea. Boom, Shazam, you get hit by that lightning bolt from God, and all of a sudden you are receptive to ideas that 5 years ago you would have rejected, and that's called good creativity.
Amen. Amen. I think what you just said is very, very important. I listened to a show recently. It was by an investment professional. I can't remember his name, unfortunately. He was on a Rich Dad radio show, but he said you earn your right to your intuition.
Yes.
You have, just like you said, you have to work and work and work, and then bam, something will happen, like lightning will strike in a way, but you have to earn your way there.
Right. And what's wrong with saying that reading a magazine about what someone in Seattle is doing and getting an inspiration from that may be your lightning bolt? It's sort of like that old joke that the guy was 100% convinced that God was going to save him during a horrible storm, and he went up on his roof, and a man in a boat came by, and the man in the boat said, "I'll save you," and the guy said, no, God is going to save me. And then an hour later, a guy in a helicopter came by and said, "We'll save you," and the man on the roof said, no, God's going to save me. And then the man dies, and he goes to heaven. He's like, "God, why didn't you save me?" And God says, "Dude, I sent you a man in a boat. I sent you a guy in a helicopter. I tried to save you twice, but you weren't receptive to it. You know, maybe it's the same thing. Maybe we just need to learn to be more receptive to the signals that we are getting, to the intuition that we are having, and learn to trust our gut a little bit better. So I love what you said from Rich Dad Poor Dad radio show. You definitely have to learn to trust your creativity, just like Picasso didn't paint the man or the woman in blue. He didn't have his blue period and with all those crazy faces that looked like, you know, a 3-year-old painted them. He didn't do that until he mastered basic artistic skills and learned that, hey, I'm really good at this. I can push the boundaries. You have to trust yourself, and that takes years sometimes. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not creative today, but I'm going to be more creative a year from now.
All right, just before continuing this conversation, for you, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. I personally recommend the audiobook The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, or you can choose the audiobook of your choice for free by trying audible.com. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Fred. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Fred. You will be entertained, and at the same time, you will help a brother out. So, everybody wins. Go to audibletrial.com/Fred for your free audiobook. You got it. Okay. A lot of people want to start something. They want to start a business. They want to paint. They want to write a book, whatever. But they don't do it. As you said earlier, they sit on their couch and they stay there, right? So, and oftentimes the reason is money. From my experience, speaking with a lot of people, I feel that money has such a grip on our emotional state. If you want to do something, if you want to start something, how do you get over that fear?
Well, I have a very counterintuitive view on money, just like I do on creativity. I have started, 15 businesses or something in my life, and the biggest failure I ever had was the business that I started with $1 million. All of the other businesses I've started with 0, and those have been the ones that have been the most successful.
Why is that?
Because you are forced to, number one, sell something. If you have $1 million, you build your website, and then you buy business cards, and you get T-shirts, and you go to a conference, and you do all of this stuff. Instead of, when you have no money, the only thing to do is to sell and to figure out how to sell this product as well as possible. Oh, I didn't get a sale today. If I don't get a sale tomorrow, I'm not going to eat. That encourages you to sell better, and you listen harder to what your customer says. Why did they say no? Well, this was their objection. How can I overcome that objection? By being desperate, broke, concerned about where your next meal is going to come from. It makes you work harder and think better about how to better position your product so that you do get a sale. If you don't have any money, you do things in a more conservative way. So when I got a whole bunch of money in one of my businesses, Frederick, you know what I did? I decorated my office, and the first thing I bought was, those laser like headlight laser projection things that project your logo down onto the floor, and they use them at the NBA games, and the logos of the teams dance around on the floor. Well, I went and bought 3 of those for my office, Frederick. What is the ROI on a laser dancing light projection system? Well, it's exactly 0. No one's going to care what my office looks like, right? But it was cool. But when I didn't have money, I didn't spend money frivolously. I only bought things that mattered, like more advertising. And if I didn't get any calls from the last ad, I changed the ad until I did get telephone calls from the ad. And so it forces you to focus on what's important, which is selling product. And if you have a bunch of money, you focus on everything in the world except figuring out the best possible sales pitch. So I think actually having money can be bad for a beginning entrepreneur. It certainly has been for me. When I've been broke, I've been better. When I've been broke, I've been more desperate, and I've worked harder to make sure I can figure out how to sell it. When I had money, I hired a salesman. And then that salesman would go out and learn what the customer was saying instead of me hearing what the customer was saying. You need to internalize the criticisms yourself as an entrepreneur, because that's what's going to make your pitch better and more compelling and sexier until all of a sudden your customers are saying yes. So I don't necessarily think that having money is a good thing. I believe in bootstrapping. My radio show I started with zero money, and it's on 12 AM FM stations around the country now and growing. The book, of course, cost nothing to start. The first business that I did that grew to 700 employees, I started with $2,000 borrowed off of my credit card, right? I didn't start them with money. And so I think that if you're sitting at home right now, well, number one, you're waiting on this creativity lightning bolt from God. Get over that. Number two, you're saying, I don't have any money. That's the best time to start, because it will make you make better decisions. If you go back in history and you look at the Fortune 500 companies, 430 of the Fortune 500 companies were started with less than $5,000 of contemporaneous money. So if in 1920 they started the company that eventually became IBM, they did it with under $5,000 of money at their time. And now it's IBM, right? You look at Dell. Dell was started with no money. Microsoft was started with no money. Apple was started with no money. It can be done, right? This idea that you have to have $1 million to start, that's just wrong. If you look back in history, some of our most successful entrepreneurs, Levi Strauss, started with $4 in his pocket. And now you have one of the largest clothing companies in the world. You don't need money to get started. Sometimes it's actually bad.
Wow. Amen. Amen. Another fear, failure. Many people are afraid of failure. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get, failure. My book will never be released. Nobody will accept it. Blah, blah, blah. How do you deal with failure?
Well, this is one of the things that I think entrepreneurs need to be a little bit different, and they need to trust that they're going to be successful one day. They need to believe in their product enough that they don't care if they hear no a bunch of times. So when I was an entrepreneur in my 20s, I was very insecure, and I was very, very afraid of failure. And luckily, I got successful. I was lucky. But I also was dating girls, and I married basically, Frederick, the first girl that said yes to me. She wasn't the first girl I kissed, but pretty close to it, right? And then we got divorced, and then I got really, really good at dating, because I would ask lots of beautiful girls out. If I saw a beautiful girl, I'd say, hey, would you like to go out? And it's one of the interesting little sidebars is that beautiful girls get asked out very infrequently because people are afraid to ask a good-looking girl out. And so they're actually usually fairly interested in dating you. And I'm not a good-looking man. I have a face for radio, right? That's why I do radio. But nevertheless, I was confident enough to start asking these girls out. And eventually I married again, and married a really beautiful woman, and much better, and we have a wonderful relationship. And the same thing is true with entrepreneurship. You have to be willing to get 99 no's before you get that first yes. And if you're not willing to do that, then you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur. You should be you should go get a job. Entrepreneurs need to have an innate ability to understand that their product is good, that their product will one day be successful, and that they have to just learn that a lot of people are going to say no. And that's what entrepreneurship is about, is overcoming all of these no's. I think the important thing is to say, okay, you don't want my product. Will you tell me why? What would make this product interesting to you? Oh, okay, if I made it green instead of blue, you might have bought it. Okay, thank you very much. And then you go and say it again, or you say, what was my sales pitch? What was wrong with it? And this is one of the reasons I love these guys that during college go and sell knives door to door. I've met there's a company called Cutco, and they hire college kids to go door to door selling knives. And those kids either fail in the first week, or at the end, when they're 50 years old, they're some of the most successful people you ever meet, because they learned how to listen to their customers' objections, overcome those objections, and then the next time they rang a doorbell, they said, I know you don't have money right now, but I know you already have a set of knives, but they learn how to overcome the customer's objections. And almost always the customer will tell you why they didn't buy from you. Listen to it and learn from it. And it's just like your creativity. You can become better at overcoming the objection. And then eventually you develop a good pitch. You develop a rapport with your customers. You develop how to sell yourself. Or otherwise you leave the industry and you go get a job working for, Coca-Cola or something like that. There's nothing wrong, though, with failure. And failure is good. Failure is a stepping stone to success. If you go and ask a billionaire or a really successful entrepreneur, tell me about how you have never failed, the guy's going to laugh and say, dude, I failed all the time. I have failed more than I have succeeded. I have 12 failures in my past and one big success, and I'm famous for my big success, and that's what we call, a billion-dollar company. And you don't know about my failures, but I failed all the time. I've had failure, tons of failure, Frederick, and the business that I've been telling you about, the one that grew to 700 employees, it also had a period in its life where it was $8 million in debt and was 2 or 3 days away from going bankrupt. That is also part of my story.
You get creative.
Oh, gosh, you get really creative when you get the letter from the bank saying you're about to lose your house. Yes, you get very creative at that time. And so I think that one of the bad things about, shows like this and ego and all that is that we hide our failures and we try to, downplay them. But what people really need to hear is I am successful today because I failed and battled through it. I am only successful today because I've had failure and kept on going. And so don't be afraid of failure. You hopefully will learn from it. I learned a lot more from my failures than I ever did from any successes. And that's true with anyone you talk to, that failure teaches you more than success does.
Once again, this is the Creative Magic Unchained. We are here with Jim Beach. He's a serial entrepreneur, speaker, award-winning radio host, and best-selling author. I love these kinds of conversation. You're very, very thanks for your honesty. Okay, you're a painter, you're a writer, not you, but let's say the listener, painter, a writer. Don't you think? Do you believe? I hear you speak about failure and money, all that. Automatically, a lot of people would like to live off their art. You have to become a businessman, in my opinion. What do you think?
I agree with you.
Or business.
Yeah, art that no one is willing to pay for eventually starves to death, right? I mean, you have to have a marketplace for it. And we don't really remember famous artists who no one appreciated. You have to be able to sell it. And, there's lots of people that make bead jewelry, and that's a beautiful thing, but it's hard to differentiate yourself. It's hard to find a marketplace for that. And it's hard to make a living selling a necklace that, is $10. I do agree, unfortunately, and it's sad that this is true, that commercialization is a huge part of art, and I wish that it weren't true, but maybe on the other hand, there's some value in that. I desperately wanted to be an architect, Frederick, and I went to 2 years of architecture school, and then I had to drop out because my business was doing so well, and I dropped out. And if we built ugly buildings, no one would buy them, right? And they eventually would get torn down and replaced by something beautiful. And I think that all art, whether it's painting, ceramics, flower arranging, architecture, jewelry making, if eventually you can't find a marketplace for it, people are telling you that it's just not that pretty, or it's just not valuable. It's not worth what you think it is. And you need to change and eventually become something that the market will support. And I think that's really sad. But on the other hand, maybe we are wrong, and maybe we need to modify our vision so that it has a marketability so that we can actually make enough money to eat. You can't do art if you die because you starve to death, right? And it is sad, but maybe that's the world judging your art and saying, you're just not good enough yet. You need to get better. You need to push the envelope a little more. You need to do something a little different, and that forces you to become better. The market is telling you you need to work and make this better. It's not good yet. And I think that that's one of the ways that people get great is by the market teaching them you need to push harder, you need to become more creative. You're not there yet. This is good, but I'm not willing to pay $1,000 yet for this painting, and a museum's not willing to pay $1 million for it yet. You need to get better. And if you look at the early works of great people, most of them were not great. They got great over time. There are people who, like Beethoven, started producing master symphonies at the age of 6, but that sort of savant ability only happens once out of a billion people. And most of us have to get better at stuff. I certainly wasn't good at much when I was 25. I had some success, but I was better at 35, and I'm a lot better now that I'm 45, and I pray that when I hit 55, I'll be infinitely better, but I'm still working on it. I work every day to make myself a better entrepreneur. That's one of the reasons I love doing radio, is because I get to interview people and learn from them. And, you learn from every single person that you interact with. You learn from every book that you read. You learn from every seminar that you go to. So I'm constantly working to make myself a better entrepreneur, a better listener, a better writer, a better radio guy, a better daddy, a better husband. Hopefully you get better at everything that you consider important to you. And if you're a painter, it's sort of naive to think that I am so good at 25 that I'm going to become world famous. That's just really not realistic. You need to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And then by the age of 35, you'll start selling. And by the age of 55, you'll be at the Met in New York City. I think we all have to realize that art requires hard work. And one of my favorite things is when they discover a painting and they realize that there's 3 or 4 paintings underneath it, and that the painter was so poor that he couldn't afford a new canvas, and he couldn't sell this painting after 2 years, so he gave up and painted something over the top of it because he couldn't afford a new canvas, and he did another painting over the top of it and tried to sell that. And then maybe he couldn't sell that, and 2 years later he painted over that because he couldn't afford a canvas, and he sells that painting, and eventually that becomes famous, and then they do some sort of scientific test to discover there's 2 paintings underneath it. That's a cool story and a good lesson for all of us.
Awesome. You mentioned, a lot of artists, they have to sell their stuff. And I think that discourages a lot of artists, that business side of things. How can they get over it?
Well, they just need to learn that that's the reality. And if they're not willing to get over it, then they give up on their art and they go get a job teaching art at school, or they become a kindergarten teacher, or they become a fireman or a cook or whatever, Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to persevere as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as anything that requires creativity, then maybe you just weren't destined to be that. Maybe you really weren't an artist, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you just failed. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with going off and becoming a cook. Maybe you'll be a great cook and have great inspiration there, right? I just think we have to acknowledge that, and millennials hate this, that we're not good at stuff in our 20s necessarily, I mean, yeah. I wasn't good at stuff in my 20s. I wasn't good at picking out women. I wasn't good at running businesses, and I wasn't creative, but I've gotten better at all of those things. And I think that's just a reality of life. We get old and our vision gets bad, right? We get old and we get weak and we die. These are just realities of life. And I think that one of the realities of life is that when you're 20 and decide what you're passionate about and what you want to go do and what you want to become and how you want to spend your life, that you then need to acknowledge that you're going to spend a decade getting marginally good at it, and then you're going to spend another decade getting good at it, and in your 40s you're going to be great at it. I think that's just one of those realities of life. And only if you're willing to persevere and fight through those stages will you become great. I think it's about working hard. We all have to work hard and persevere, or otherwise we give up and, become a fireman. Not that there's anything wrong with being a fireman, but, that's not the creative goal that we have for ourselves when we're 21.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap this up. Two more questions. If you were stuck on an island, no one else, $500 in your pocket, a laptop, what would you do in the next 7 days?
Oh my God.
Oh, no, you know what? No, you don't even have $500 because you started a company with no money. You just have a laptop and you're on an island by yourself. What do you do?
Well, that seems like a really hard question, but the more I think about it, the easier it gets. I love writing, and so I would write another book. And I have one of the things about creative people is that the first book is hard to do. The first company is hard to do, and you barely have an idea. And then the second one's easier, and then you publish your third book or you start your third company, and eventually you have a backlog. At this point, I have about 5 books that I desperately want to write. I have 10 companies that I could start tomorrow if I had enough time. The reason I don't start them is I don't have enough time right now. As you get good at something, you paint that first painting. It's hard. By the time you've done your 100th painting, I imagine you have a backlog of paintings that you would love to do. And if that's not true, you're probably not getting this creativity stuff yet. And I imagine that most people that are really good at what they do, hopefully, and I imagine that this is true, have a backlog of stuff they would love to do. If all I had was a bunch of time and a computer, there are 5 books that I would sit down and finish writing. I've got 90% of one done and 70% of one and 20% of one and 1% of one. I'd like to get all of those done and submit them to publishers, and then the publisher would pay and send an airplane to get me off my island, right? And I could come back to society. It's sort of like that story. I would love to go to jail for a while because it would give me time to get caught up on all the stuff that I haven't gotten done. If you're a creative person and you're getting good at it, you're going to get inundated with ideas. The creativity is like a bell curve, not a bell curve, a J curve. Really hard, sort of hard, not so hard, getting easier, getting way easier. Oh my gosh, I'm inundated with ideas. And if you focus on working and becoming more creative, you're going to get more and more and more and more and more and more and more ideas. And eventually you'll have so many ideas, it's a matter of picking and choosing which one to do first.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Where can we find you and where can we buy your books?
The book is called School for Startups, and it's all about the first 12 businesses that I started and how I got the idea for each one. So it's really interesting from a business creativity standpoint. School for Startups on Amazon, of course. And you can check me out at schoolforstartupsradio.com and listen to my radio show, the online version, every day. And I'm at Entrepreneur Jim on that Twitter thing and would love to hear from anybody.
All right. Hey, great, Jim. Wow. Thanks for this great interview. It was insightful, and thanks for all this advice. Really, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor. It was great to get to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Jim. All right, guys. Hey, how was that interview? I loved it. Did you love it? Did you like it? Did it inspire you somehow? Are you more like, enthusiastic about taking the first step? Just take the first step. Hey, if you were stuck on an island with $500, with a laptop and an internet connection, you could do a whole lot of things, even if you don't have money. Hey, I want to thank Jim Beach. Thank you so much for your time. That was an amazing episode. I loved those episodes. These are episodes that I love, to do. All right, it's time for me to ride off into the sunset. Catch me on Facebook, Frederick Bai, on Twitter at ByFred, my YouTube channel, Creative Magic, and don't forget, with this, stay safe, live with purpose, passion, and love. Bye-bye.